Good evening, everyone. I'll get you to silence cell phones and other electronic devices, and I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land, and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. With that, we move to the approval of the agenda, moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The Council approved the June 19th, 2023 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. I will note that Councillor Wright has sent her regrets for this evening. She did mention she may come in on Zoom, but then she said no to that. Okay, thank you. Members of Council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Are there any announcements this evening? I know Councillor Butwell has an announcement. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With it being Pride Month, I think it's important to announce that to state, in light of the recent anti-LGBTQ2S+ events that have been occurring, Councillor Wright and I wish to demonstrate our unwavering support for the students, families, and community members of ENSS and the entire Brighton community. The recent anti-LGBTQ2S+ posters we have witnessed are deeply troubling. We wholeheartedly condemn the behavior. It goes against the principles of respect, acceptance, and equality that we hold dear. We cannot allow such a distressing movement to shame and degrade individuals based on their sexual orientation. Brighton should be a place where compassion thrives, diversity is celebrated, and love conquers fear. Pride events are not about exclusion, but about celebrating the uniqueness of every individual and fostering understanding. To those overwhelmed, angry, or hateful, I urge you to reflect on the experiences of LGBTQ+ individuals in a predominantly heterosexual world. We have a duty to uplift, not tear down, those who face daily challenges due to their identity. Equality is not just a concept, it's an ideal we strive for every day. We must educate and promote love to combat hate. We call upon each council member and every citizen of Brighton to reject those actions and stand against bigotry and discrimination. Let this be a turning point, a moment of reflection and collective determination. Through conversations that challenge our biases, bridges divides, and fosters empathy, we can create a community that embraces acceptance and inclusivity. Brighton can be a beacon of hope where love and understanding prevail. Together, let us inspire change, champion equality, and build a future where everyone can live, love, and thrive without fear or prejudice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know Deputy Mayor Anderson, you have an announcement.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Today I was very happy to see Dr. Evans' office crowded with patients, and he's off to the races. He's worked out a lot of his technical problems that he had with his system there. Also, I know we should be all happy. Last week, Linda Evans, Dr. Evans' wife, and her crew signed up 500 new patients transferred from Dr. I think it's from Trenton. Anyhow, he had a number of patients from Brighton, and they signed up about 500. There's still 200 people they're looking for that are to be registered, and that's hard to get these people that once they want a doctor, get a doctor, and they don't show up for the doctor. So if those 200 people are out there and want to see your doctor, better get over to the Dr. Evans' office sometime.
Thank you for that.
All right.
Yeah, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that Councillor Butwell won a Spirit Award for being the best realtor. Congratulations, Councillor Butwell.
Very nice. Any other announcements this evening? We should all just sing Kumbaya. We're getting along so well. Thank you all. Take us to the adoption of the minutes moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council adopt the June 5th, 2023 council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell, the council adopt the June 12th planning meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening, which brings us to our one delegation. Council will hear this one delegation this evening from Dan Borowec, Director of Economic Development Planning, Strategic Initiatives for Northumberland County regarding the Broadband Initiative. Delegates have 10 minutes to provide council with their information. It is noted that language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Council will be provided with an opportunity to ask questions of clarification from the delegation based on the information they have presented. Council is reminded that this is not an opportunity to engage in debate with the delegate nor advance a public policy position. Delegates are reminded that council does not make decisions during the delegation portion of tonight's meeting. Mr. Borowec, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you where we are with our current initiative, Broadband as a Utility.
Dan, could you draw the microphone closer to you?
Sure.
Just so that it can be picked up.
How's that?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I have a short slide presentation, and it's divided into basically two parts. Part one is maybe just a walkthrough as to where we began and where we are. It's fairly succinct, so if I could ask for the next slide, we have this all worked out with the process. So, just a background and a timeline as to the activities involved in this particular initiative. In August of 2019, County Council approved a digital strategy. And with that digital strategy, there was the recognition that in order for the digital strategy to go forward, there needed to be the necessary infrastructure to support that. In November of 2019, the province hosted its first provincial rural broadband conference in North Bay. It was at that time that we had an opportunity to chat with various service providers and other communities who laid out their basic platform for trying to acquire broadband and connectivity for their particular communities. And certainly that learning experience was a critical piece in how we move forward. In March of 2020, COVID very much exposed the broadband connectivity challenges for the county. And to that end, by July of 2020, the Economic Recovery Task Force identified broadband as the #1 priority. Given that positioning and public need, our next step was to try and determine a way to create the necessary infrastructure to make this work. So by December of 2020, we had engaged with a group called the Nordicity Group, who did one of the key elements we were instructed to do in terms of wanting to try and resolve our broadband challenge, which was to determine exactly what we had before we went out and asked for funding or the equivalent needs of funding without knowing exactly what that funding would be used for. And the model that the Nordicity Group put forward was the fiber to the home option. We had looked at other technologies that were out there, but given Northumberland's topography and other related challenges, they provided a business case which gave us a starting point for fiber to the home. If I could have the next slide, please. So in parallel to that, we recognize that Northumberland was there to facilitate the activity that would make this happen and not actually be the operator of what was to become broadband as a utility. So to that end, in December of 2020, we put out an RFP for a P3 partnership. We were looking for a private company that could both build the necessary infrastructure to provide fiber to the home, and at the same time, with that, they would need to come to the table with X amount of dollars to make this particular initiative work. In parallel to that, over the course of January and February of 2021, we applied for two different programs. One was the federal program known as the Universal Broadband Fund, and the other was ICON, which was improving connectivity in Ontario. So applications were made to both of those funds. By March of 2021, we had selected the private sector partner, which is a group known as the Digital Infrastructure Group, known as DIG for their acronym, which I guess is appropriate if you're installing fiber, and their funding partner, which is a French-based firm known as Meridium, whose funding of projects is based on long-term investment to the shareholder and primarily infrastructure projects. So they are involved in similar projects in various locations in the US and Europe. They have one ongoing project specifically to fiber and broadband in Canada, and that's taking place in Alberta at this point in time. By July, from July to September, we had successfully acquired both UBF and ICON funding through our applications, which amounted to $45 million. So of that $45 million, 17 million was from the federal government and 28 million was from the provincial government. And in April of 2022 in Codrington, MPP and Minister Pecuniary made that announcement. Next slide, please. I should point out too that the 45 million is all grant money. It is not a repayable loan. It is purely grant. So in April of 2022, once the funding was confirmed, the negotiations began for our private-public partnership in terms of term sheet negotiations. By June of 2022, Council had approved the creation of a municipal services corporation, because what we did was we created a utility to structure the type of partnership we wanted to engage in. And then by September of 2022, after nearly a year's worth of negotiations, we had contribution agreements in hand from the federal and provincial governments, which confirmed the $45 million grant. In July, next month, we will have the final P3 project agreement signed. We met with the principals last week and have managed to distill what was pages and pages and pages of negotiable points down to 6 bullet points, which we found agreement on last Thursday. And so we are projecting that in September of 2023, shovels will be in the ground beginning here in Brighton. So that's the framework of what's happening. Just as an illustrator, when we began, this is the hodgepodge of information we had that was related to what might possibly be in the ground, in the air, hidden, known as dark fiber, and anything else attached to connectivity in Northumberland. And I apologize that the map isn't readable. It wasn't very readable when we received it. And to blow it up large enough to have it make any sense, we probably have to go to a drive-in. But the reality is, the first step in this process of trying to sort out what's already here, as opposed to what we require, was a significant amount of work, because in terms of having a positive working relationship with both the federal and provincial governments, we did not want to do an overbuild. So no. So in our final arrangement, I'll speak to that once we get to another slide. The intent is very much that what we are about to do does not override or duplicate what is already present in the landscape of Northumberland. As you can see, there's a fair amount here. It really depends upon who owns the particular fiber and what they're willing to what the consumer is willing to pay for that fiber to utilize the fiber. Next slide, please. This is the relative current state of connectivity in Northumberland. The white areas are a fairly good indicator of what's there, which isn't a great deal. There are concentrations of various forms of coverage, and they are color coded throughout. Now, this particular map is probably about 15 months past its prime. It took a fair amount of work to actually uncover what is actually available in Northumberland. And in point of fact, the Nordicity group were driving the roads. looking for information. It's often referred to as dark fiber, which has been put in place quite some time ago, and certainly the major telecoms are very protective of that information. Next slide, please. So a couple of things, just in terms of project scope. At this point in time, there are 37,389 households in Northumberland. Of that, we have a contribution agreement that states that we will service 13,448 of them, which are currently unserved or underserved. Our in the purchasing framework of what needs to be bought in order to accomplish that aim, we're looking at about 2,000 kilometers worth of fiber that will either be aerial in nature or in ground in nature. The fact that this is fiber to the home means that we will have a minimum of 1 gigabyte available in terms of service, with the capacity to go to 10 gigabytes. The financial commitment in this particular final structure is a little more than $150 million. And to that end, 45 million is the result of both federal and provincial support. The remaining 105 million plus is through Meridian, who will do a debt equity relationship in order to initiate the rest of the build. From the county's perspective, county council financial commitment to this project was $500,000. Certainly we have incurred costs because, as you can well imagine, we have incurred costs in terms of both legal and professional assistance as we move forward. However, within the contribution agreement, there is administrative costs that can be applied as an offset for that. This is broadband as a utility, and what differentiates that from a normal build out is that possibly the best model to try and illustrate this is train and track. What we're doing is building track to those households, and we're making that track available to ISPs to rent the track to provide the service. This will be an open access network after 3 years. In the first 3 years, there will be one ISP provider who will be responsible for provision of service. None of the big name players have an interest in that particular role at this point in time. And one of the points of sell to both the federal and provincial governments is the fact that by creating this type of infrastructure and putting this type of infrastructure in place, it provides an opportunity for smaller or independent ISPs to actually rent space to actually perform the ISP function. Most of them don't have the pockets deep enough to put wire on poles or ditch that wire to a state where there's a business case to be made for volume. As you can see, this began 4 years ago. It's been a bit of a journey. But this is transformational infrastructure. I guess you can view it as much like the first railroad that came through, the first major bridge that came through, or widening to build a canal. All of it had a monumental effect in shaping community. And in the case of this type of transformational infrastructure, it impacts everything from healthcare to education to entertainment to work. And it, in many ways, both attracts potential investment because it positions us in an innovative place. There are multiple contractual arrangements for this, which adds to the complexity of how this all comes together. However, as a private public partnership, one of our strengths has been to be able to build relationships and trust with those who will be engaging in this activity. So I would suggest that by September, we will have, we'll be looking at connectivity. And I'm more than prepared to answer any questions that might be directed my way.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Dan. Appreciate the information. Can you, I'm not going to ask you to speak for Hydro One, but I wonder if you could just talk to us about what's happening with the infrastructure work that Hydro One began to put into the ground and have since stopped as a result of their pilot project and now ceasing that pilot project.
Certainly. We're certainly aware of it. We were and have been all along. There's been some discussion between a dig and Hydro One. That is activity that rests between the two of them. I think there's recognition on all sides that if there is certain infrastructure already in place, then there is a way for potentially some way to utilize that infrastructure. It will happen. That investment was it's been an investment made in community, and I think the intent is to see how that can benefit community in the end.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Fredis, you had your hand up.
To the chair, thank you, and to Mr. Borowec, thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful and very helpful and informative, and addressing the Hydro One thing. It's probably an unfair question, but I'm delighted to hear you're starting in Brighton and working your way west. But to cover the entire county, what is kind of the term of the project?
Yes, there's a drop dead date of December 2025. So, and the way the project will roll out is that once a month prior to fiber being either put in the ground or in the air, the selected ISP who will be providing the service will be going home to home for each home that will be passing by to determine whether the individual in a particular household wants that service or not. So they, rather than build everything out to the end of 2025 and then begin selling, they're very, very proactive. They want to start generating usage as quickly as possible. As an illustrator, 2 years ago, we prepared a grant for Borowec Haldeman because there was some limited funding available for rural broadband prototypes, and so we prepared one for Borowec Haldeman to do a project that wouldn't exceed $1 million from the contribution and from the federal source. And there were three or four different smaller ISPs who were looking to enter the marketplace. One of them was successful. The original estimates were something like that amount of money and would cover, could reach 200 households. The uptake on that was about 70%, which for first time through is quite an extraordinary uptake. It's difficult to change people's minds when something new comes along, because in many cases there are some folks who are very much attached either to Starlink and satellite capacity, and or they have somehow ended up in the right location and are happy with Bell or Cogeco or Rogers. But what the advantage to fiber to the home is the ability to scale up easily and not be disrupted by geography or weather. And so it'll start to happen quickly.
Do you have a follow-up?
The chair, yes, I do. Thank you. Dan, I realize it's just an expression, home to home, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to advocate for our Codrington Fire Hall. It's our primary EOC here in the municipality, and I think it's essential for health and safety reasons that it's kind of early in the list.
I would suggest it's probably going to be real early on the list, because one of the points of presence in Brighton has the reason where the project begins in Brighton is because Brighton has 2 points of presence for the main line that goes between Toronto and Montreal. And in this particular design, it means that there's an automatic backup should something happen to that Montreal-Toronto line on line 1. So it'll be line 2 that's available to maintain connectivity. And line 2 is just outside of Codrington. And I'm sure there's a willingness on the part of our private sector partner to be a good corporate citizen.
We like those. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Dan. What will Brighton look like in September? All the shovels in the ground. What, I've heard this before. I've heard shovels, I've heard all kinds of stuff. So I think we need to be prepared.
Brighton's always beautiful in the fall, Deputy Mayor. You know that.
But are we going to see a lot of, but like we've seen in the past year, we've had Bell come through with their fiber. Actually, over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been going crazy. Cogeco's stepping it up now. Is that because of this process? And there's a bunch of questions here.
Sure.
And what's Brighton going to look like in September?
Well, I'm sure after the announcement, the activity will begin from there. One of the things they have to do first of all is prep the necessary points of presence, and that's the first part of the build, because from that's where fiber will originate and move out towards the countryside. There's mapping available for this, and prior to the September announcement, because this is the startup location, if it's acceptable to mayor and council, we can come back and lay out exactly what's happening where.
I think we look forward to that, and I think it would be especially good for staff to have that information as regardless of whether this is a county project or not, it will be Brighton staff that gets all the questions and Brighton Council.
And I guess to that end, we're also sort of preparing for questions through a draft communication plan that's in place as well, because one of the things that we don't want happening is confusion in the community and non-response. So that's well underway as well. So that will be in place. So we will invest in not only marketing what the opportunity is, but also how those questions can be addressed.
Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Just one other question, Mr. Borowec. Would it be possible to get a copy of your presentation or even edited version? Thank you. That we could share with the Rural Advisory Committee so that
Sure.
Get their spirits up.
Yes.
And even better, is it possible maybe to entice you to come back on July 6th and present to them?
Oh, sure.
I'll buy you coffee and donut. How's that?
No, that's okay. No, that's all right. This is me excited. That would be fine.
And that's July 6th at what time? 4:30 p.m. in this room.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you.
That's no problem whatsoever.
They'll appreciate that information from the proverbial horse's mouth.
Well, and they'll, as I said, they'll be first up to bat, and certainly, everything. Just as an aside, one of the things we're looking at to follow up with is what's available in terms of applications and what we can provide as potential innovative technologies that either the manufacturing or the agricultural or the tourism community might want to embrace in order to benefit their own operations. So it will be significant.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Director Borowec, thank you very much for your delegation this evening. I have a motion moved by I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the presentation from Dan Borowec, Director, Economic Development Planning, Strategic Initiatives for Northumberland County regarding broadband. Is there any discussion on the motion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thanks again, Dan. Madam Clerk, are there any citizens' comments this evening? Thank you. Brings us to staff reports. Our first report is the 2023 Review of Finance Policies Report. Director Whitfield, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council approve. I have that right? Yep. The mileage allowance policy, the grant and aid community grant policy, and the procurement policy as revised and attached to this report. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair and to Director Whitfield, thank you. I'm looking through the procurement policy and looking at the signing authorities, and first off, I applaud you. It's very conservative and well done. But I have a question. I'm wondering perhaps there might be a few positions. Maybe we should consider increasing their signing authority. For example, in light of the IT master plan that we recently agreed to implement in principle, and broader scope and role for our IT manager and supplemental staff, recognizing server upgrades, cloud storage, cybersecurity, system integrations, and those sorts of things. I wonder if the signing authority that at 10,000 might be a little too restrictive to him being able to do his job effectively, and maybe we need to look at the next level. And that may also apply in whether one or two other instances as well. Is that something that perhaps we should be considering?
Director?
Yes, so when we looked at the entire table of delegated authorities, which by the way are council's delegated authorities, these suggestions were made based on the managers that had or did not have a director. In other words, they weren't the head of that department. And so that's why you'll see the IT manager being at 10,000. If council want all of the managers to be at the same level at 25,000, I'm completely supportive of that too, and can make the changes quickly. But that is the reasoning, was just looked at who was a department head and who was not a department head, because then there's somebody else that is in the department that has a higher authority if the spending goes above. That was my reasoning, and that was it.
Anything further?
Just to follow up, I mean, I have no problems with the rationale. I'm curious about it. It may be an opportunity to free up some time for the next person up the chain to delegate down a little bit of this signing stuff. I mean, these are all good people and we trust them. It seems to make some sense to me to free up more senior management's time from some of these things.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I would agree with the way you have it set up now. I think our senior management and directors should have more, should have full control of where our finances are going. And if they're by allowing some movement and some approvals, but day to day, I think the communication is between those people within that department, and you can go all the way up to the CAO too if we need somebody to sign something. So if everybody is running around with a pen and checkbook, that's not a good way to put it. But I think the way you have it, I would support staff on how you've come up with this, and obviously you put a lot of thought into it. So that's my opinion.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Perhaps when we review this, we should take a look at delegated signing authorities as a more global aspect at some point in the future, rather than dealing with it tonight, I mean. Okay. Next report is the 2024 cab and chassis acres dependable 1500 USG pumper tanker. Chief, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, not at this time, but I'd be more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council receives the 2024 cabin chassis acres dependable 1500 USG pumper tanker report and authorizes staff to purchase the vehicle from Dependable Emergency Vehicles for $681,689.22, including the expense portion of the HST. And the council authorizes staff to upfit the 2024 pumper tanker with a two-way radio system, tool mounting supports, Brighton and fire rescue branding, and other pre-construction items. The total cost of the vehicle purchase and uplifting will not exceed the approved capital funding of $700,000. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair and to the chief, thank you. First off, congratulations, chief. You always manage to find a rare piece of equipment in a difficult market. You've done it once again, so my hat's off to you, sir. My question is, do you anticipate there will be some residual value in the old piece of equipment once the new one arrives? And do you have a guesstimate of what that might be?
Chief Thompson.
Yes, our policy says we'll put it on gov deals, any kind of used equipment that we sell. And right now in today's market, I would say around $30,000 plus for that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to the award of the request for proposal PW 2023-07 Brighton Wastewater Treatment System Upgrades. Director Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
No, not at this time.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council approves and awards the contract for the Brighton Wastewater Treatment System Upgrades as outlined in the request for proposal PW 2023-07 to JL Richards and Associates Limited in the amount of $1,158,444, excluding HST. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair and Director Whiteman, thank you. As I read this, I'm presuming it's predominantly for engineering design work. Is that a correct assumption or presumption?
Yes.
Okay. The second part of my question is recognizing from the last wastewater report that sludge buildup was a contributor to our ammonia issue. Is some of this engineering work relegated to sludge removal, recovery, whatever measures to minimize that sludge problem and to start to address some of the ammonia issues?
The desludging, I think, is more of a short-term solution. This will take, probably 2 years to 3 years before it's officially functional, operational, and so on. So sludging removal, I think, is more short-term to deal with our issues.
I think that, if I may, I think the question is, will the design incorporate a sort of automated sludge removal? Or will sludge continue to be an issue at that location? Did I cover that? Yeah.
I think it's too early. I don't want to say it's too early to say because it's we haven't even gone to conceptual design. So I believe so, but I don't want to say right now. I believe it is.
Fingers crossed indeed. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Been a long time in the works, that one. Next report is the articulating sidewalk tractor and attachment. Director Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, not at this time.
We have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. That council approved the award of the subject tender PW 2023-06 to FST Canada Inc. in the amount of $188,690,000 plus HST. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is on minor sports ice rates. Mr. Miller, Director Miller, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wielden, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receives a staff report regarding minor ice information at rates as information. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no notices of motion or motions, which takes us to unfinished business. And it's the correspondence from Laura Wang requesting assistance for licensing and relocation of food trailer mobile canteen, with a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wielden, that council receive the correspondence from Laura Wang requesting assistance for licensing and relocation of food trailer mobile canteen. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wielden.
Thank you. I trust that council received the correspondence between Councillor Wright and Ms. Wang. It seems that there were some miscommunications in how the bylaw was communicated, how the RFP was carried out, and through further investigation, Councillor Wright found that some of these things, some of Ms. Wang's concerns were quite valid. And Councillor Fredis and I have taken a look over Councillor Wright's work as well, and found that yes, these things do seem, a few things seem to be out of order that are communication based. And so with that, we recommend that this be given another look. Councillor Fredis had some specific things he wanted to draw attention to, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Fredis.
Thank you. I had some thoughts and ideas. I know Councillor Wielden did, and as did Councillor Wright. And rather than perhaps get into them here, what I think we'd like to suggest at this point is we refer this to staff, but ask staff to wait for Councillor Wright to return on Monday or Tuesday, because she seems to have established a rapport. And we can then get into more fulsome discussion then on some of the alternative measures, or I can elaborate on those suggestions now if you like.
Councillor Butwell.
To the chair, thank you. To Councillor Fredis, I think considering that we are now in the latter half of June, and this is operating season, it would be, especially in light of the information that Councillor Wright seems to have been able to discover, put together, that perhaps we should have a discussion so that Laura might be able to get her business up and going as quickly as possible and minimize any additional hardship.
Okay.
So I'll ask you to continue, but carefully.
Yes. I guess one of the things that came up in Councillor Wright's note was that Mrs. Wang seemed to have, I use the word reluctantly, agreed to the Ontario Street Marina spot, but there was a problem with power, and the alternatives were to run a generator, and I visited there on the weekend, and I'm convinced that a generator would drive the neighbors there crazy, and there would be no end of complaints to the municipality and council. So that doesn't seem to be a practical solution. The alternative would be for us to put in hydro, and I'm not an advocate of the municipality subsidizing that sort of thing. I know Councillor Wright has a different view in her memo, but I can't support that one. Particularly in light of the fact that we already have hydro installed and available at the King Edward. The bylaw that we approved in March was to provide for 2 vendor locations in King Edward Park, but the enacting bylaw doesn't stipulate that, unfortunately. Additionally, the bylaw or the recommendation of the RFP from March stipulated a requirement for $5 million in insurance, but that's not established in the amended bylaw. Again, unfortunately, so we have a bit of a dilemma here on our hands, and perhaps a bit of an optics issue. In talking to Councillor Wright before we left, I think, and Councillor Wilden, I think we kind of concur that perhaps the best way to manage our way through this is simply to recognize that spot is there, to allow Mrs. Wang to return to King Edward, to use the plug-in that was established for her in previous years. We've established an electric rate of $200 in the RFP. It seems a bit aggressive to me based on what I pay for my household, but it's not that outrageous. So I think we need to make clear that you're going to have to pay for hydro at some rate, and that's what the other canteen operator is paying. So it's only fair that she pay the same rate. And then we need to establish a fair and appropriate level of rent for the spots. I mean, we only had 2 bidders, and I'm not sure you can reasonably expect that everybody's going to bid the same number, or that you can use the high bidder as the benchmark for the alternative. If you had 4 or 5, I could see that. But in this instance, I don't see that we have that leverage. It's kind of an inverse procurement thing, if you like. So it seems to me that would be the better way to do it. And then it gives us time to revamp the entire bylaw to address all of the missing elements, and to make perfectly clear that next year this will be the process, and these will be the requirements. I might add that over the course of the weekend, I consulted a neighbor who's in the insurance business about the cost to increase coverage from $2 to $5 million. And this individual told me that for a small business enterprise like this, it could easily, the premium increase could easily double or triple, which is a fair bit of money for a small business operator. And I'm not sure that it really should be our role to discourage small business operators. Her other comment was that in her view, and this is her view, not mine, but her view, that she thought 5 million was a little excessive. 2 million was more the norm. I tried to test that by doing some research on the internet, and I noticed places like Kingston, Oshawa, Clarington all stipulated 2 million liability coverage for their mobile canteen operators. So we would be consistent with a number of other municipalities out there. If our lawyers are able to provide going forward some valuable advice on why we need to be at 5 million, because it's municipal property and some of the other things, I'm quite prepared to support that then, but I haven't seen that at this point. And in the way that we currently have our amended bylaw written, we've not embraced the 5 million. So asking for it is, if I understand the rules correctly, not legal.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Councillor Wielden.
Yeah, I'd also like to make sure moving forward that we have either the same rules for all locations or some differentiation between them. As I understand it, different locations still have 2 million, whereas the 5 million only applied at King Edward Park, and that only through the RFP. So if we're going to be moving up to 5 million, it should be the same everywhere, unless there's some higher risk at King Edward Park. But yeah, just to clear up miscommunications and give her another chance at it. As I understand it, all she received was a decline, and still had a lot of questions. So if we can clear that up and give it another try, I would be in favor of that.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you to the chair. And just further, it's my understanding that there were two spaces that were, if perhaps, who would this go to? This would be who received the RFP?
The economic development team.
Economic development team. So to Mr. Hagerman, if we had made two spaces available and there were two applicants, but we failed to set a minimum bid amount, then unfortunately to me, even just from a history in procurement, we did receive two bids and we do have two spaces. And perhaps we could consider this year as perhaps allowing Ms. Wang to return to the King Edward Street location with the eye on cleaning up perhaps some of the behind the scenes things that need cleaning up and establishing a rate for next season.
I do think we did establish a minimum, and it was the $200 per month hydro, and that minimum bid was not met in the RFP document, but I'll get Mr. Hagerman
Yeah.
to comment on that.
So through the chair, the $200 hydro flat rate is a monthly piece of the proposal. Just like the mayor stated, that was not met. The other proposal was met and then some. And to accept the second bid would not have been an equitable business practice at this point.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I had believed that the 200 was applied and then there was an additional amount that they would bid for the space. It was a separate line item, the hydro was?
I don't think the way the RFP was written, it was a separate line item.
Okay,
I think it would have been an all-inclusive bid rate.
That's correct. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
So members of council, right now we have a motion to receive the correspondence. Is it our wish, and Councillor Fredis, this is your motion, is it our wish to send this back to staff to negotiate with the proponent, or do we just simply want to receive the correspondence and move on?
To the chair, I still think we'd like to have staff revisit in conjunction with Councillor Wright to see if we can somehow expeditiously broker some compromise that makes everybody reasonably happy.
I guess I'm a little reluctant to get council involved in what I see as an operational issue. So if we're going to send this back to staff to negotiate with the proponent, let's do that. Let's not wait for Council Wright to come back, so that if there is a way forward, we can in fact get this mobile canteen established and the business running. And if there's not a way forward, then perhaps Council Wright, when she's back, can help communicate with Ms. Wang and the municipality if that still is a requirement.
Yeah, that's fair. The only reason I suggested that is Councillor Wright is rather empathetic, and I think she's established a level of rapport and communication with Mrs. Wang that might be helpful. Not necessarily influential, but helpful in bridging any communication gaps. That's the only reason I proposed that. But I'm quite content to let staff handle it and have Councillor Wright follow up with them when she returns.
How about we get something in the motion that gets the ball rolling, and should staff need to reach out to Councillor Wright to bridge those gaps, then they know that can happen next week sometime. Fair enough?
That's fair.
So something like, and this is my words, not yours, so something like, and direct staff to negotiate hydro and rental rates for the proponent to locate a food trailer at King Edward Park. And direct staff, so this will be in addition to, and direct staff to negotiate hydro and rental rates for the proponent to locate a food trailer at King Edward Park. Does that work? Do we want to add anything about reviewing the canteen bylaw, or will staff simply do that at some point Staff have that on their radar? Director Walsh?
Yeah, through the mayor, I can also offer obtaining a legal opinion on the insurance rate. And then we'll consolidate mobile canteen bylaw.
Okay, so that's on your radar sometime this season, so we can have it in place for next season. Thank you. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. In light of the confusing number of bylaws and amendments relating to this issue and the challenge of tracking down all the bits and pieces of information, I would like to see the bylaw rewritten. So whatever is there, the old existing, the amendment, all repealed, and a new clean bylaw written.
Director Walsh did use the word consolidated, so that would be the intent.
Okay,
Bring it all
Thank you.
together as one, in one package,
Okay.
rather than another piece of an amendment that we have to figure out where it belongs. Just give me a moment while I write this. So I've added the words "and further direct staff to negotiate hydro and rental rates for the proponent to locate a food trailer at King Edward Park." Councillor Fredis, this is your motion. Is that okay? And Councillor Wheeldon as a seconder. Any further discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Just a little bit, and I don't have the motion in front of me or the because my iPad's not working. However, we're negotiating hydro rates, which were already in the RFP.
Yeah, I think the intent would be to negotiate at that level, but we'd leave that to staff to figure out.
Okay.
Anything further? Unless you want that to come out. All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And staff, you heard the comment that if you feel the need or want to access Councillor Wright, she is willing to aid in this. Thank you. Moves us to bylaws, and the one and only before us is the procurement bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to approve the procurement policy for the corporation of the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Takes us to reports of advisory committees of council, reports and minutes and council reports. The first comes from the strategic planning review team. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council, well, perhaps I should do what I do with the rest of them and note that this was prepared by myself and Councillor Wheeldon. Councillor Wheeldon, would you like to add or highlight anything in this report?
Just one thing I noticed on review this evening, that in the analysis and comments, there is an extra that seems a little out of place because it implies that we have draft strategies that are already here, and they are in fact something we have asked staff for.
Very well. Thank you. So council take note of the additional "the" in the analysis. The motion is moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council receives the report from the strategic planning review team and the report from Jenny White, collaborative design consultant, and that council received the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis for information, and the council directs staff to provide strategies for council consideration at the June 29th committee of the whole meeting. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next is our Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting of April 25th. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council received the April 25th, 2023 Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. From our Heritage Advisory Committee, moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council received the April 3rd, 2023 Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Community Events and Civic Awards Steering Committee, moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council received the May 9th, 2023 Community Events and Civic Awards Steering Committee meeting as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a recommendation coming out of the June 6th Committee Events and Civic Awards Steering Committee. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council approved the recommendation from the Community Events and Civic Awards Steering Committee that the deadline for the nominations of the Citizen of the Year Award be extended due to the minimal detail nomination received for the award to be presented on Canada Day 2023. And further, that the Citizen of the Year Award be presented to the recipient at Applefest 2023 in lieu of Canada Day 2023. And further, that council directs staff to review the process used for nominations of the awards arranged by the Community Events and Civic Awards Steering Committee. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. So just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit here. We did have some nominees, however, in order to give the nominator some time to provide to our committee some more detailed information that we weren't received, that would give them time as well. So that is the basic reason for moving this, that we just didn't get enough information and there just really isn't enough time to get that all done before in 2 weeks. So that's the reason for moving it. Gives opportunity to get more information and maybe, yeah, we'll see where it goes at Applefest.
Thank you. Councillor Butwell.
To the chair, thank you. Councillor Rowley, how many nominations were received?
3.
Thank you.
I believe there was 3. We need to find a better way to engage our community in uplifting and celebrating people who live here.
And all sorts of things, actually. It was 3 according to my conversation with the chair as well. Yeah, just to confirm that. Anything further? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Pardon me, Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council direct staff to complete the seasonal cleanings and regular cleanings as needed of the Hilton Hall so that the hall can be utilized for Heritage Committee meetings and other community heritage events. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, the Girl Guides are still planning to use this, are they not?
I guess I'd ask the Director Whiteman to speak to that. I thought maybe something had changed there, but maybe I'm wrong.
I believe we have looked at some issues there. I think we're okay, but I can't say for sure. But generally speaking, we just need to clean the ceiling, a few other things. So it looks like everything will be in place for the Girl Guides.
Perfect. So it's good to go as far as you know. Very well. Deputy Mayor.
I read somewhere that the Boy Scouts or the Cubs are back on the trail. Were they looking at using that facility as well? Did you hear anything about that?
They have not asked for use of that facility, and I have just received an email from, or it was a Facebook message, actually, now that I say that, from a proponent wishing to use a municipal center for the beginning of a Beavers program, which is the youngest level of scouting. We have issues in our basement in this building that I think we're trying to work through on many levels. But it behooves everyone to remember that the Scotty Broughton Youth Center used to stand right where we're sitting. The lands were turned over to the municipality for the use of a civic center and municipal hall under the auspices that this place would always have a space available for scouting. So it is the responsibility of the municipality, should there be a scouting movement in the municipality, to find space for that group. And now that staff have heard that come out of my mouth, I will forward the message on to probably Mr. Castleman to figure out who that belongs to and where we can put them. When I was in Scouts, it was in the basement of this building. I know that that's probably not the best place for people these days. There are issues with the basement of this building. There's going to be construction going on. There's no egress. I'm sure the fire chief has concerns about putting a bunch of young children in the basement, although no one cared when I was down there. I don't know. But never mind. Maybe they still wouldn't care, Chief. I'm surprised they didn't put my office down there now that I'm saying that. But we do have a responsibility, given the donation of the land, to make sure that we have a space for scouting in the community. So I would extend that to guiding as well, although that was not the deal made back in the 80s. Deputy Mayor.
Well, perhaps on a temporary basis while we work out all those concerns and renovations, they could be offered the same facility up there as the guides do. I don't know, but they're looking for space, obviously. So if we can help them, it's good.
I think if that makes sense and staff see a way through the path through to that with this proponent, then that's a good idea too. Anything further on the motion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to reports, minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The only one before us is Lower Trent. Moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council received the Lower Trent Conservation Authority board meeting minutes, May 11th, 2023, as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first is from Diane Noble on behalf of the Women of Ontario Say No with regard to amendments to improve municipal codes of conduct and enforcement. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the request from Diane Noble on behalf of the Women of Ontario Say No regarding legislative amendments to improve municipal code of conduct and enforcement. Whereas all Ontarians deserve and expect a safe and respectful workplace. Whereas municipal governments, as the democratic institutions most directly engaged with Ontarians, need respectful discourse. Whereas several incidents in recent years of disrespectful behavior and workplace harassment have occurred amongst members of municipal council. Whereas these incidents seriously and negatively affect the people involved and lower public perceptions of local governments. Whereas municipal codes of conduct are helpful tools to set expectations of council member behavior. Whereas municipal governments do not have the necessary tools to adequately enforce the compliance with municipal codes of conduct. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the municipality of Brighton supports the call of the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario for the Government of Ontario to introduce legislation to strengthen municipal codes of conduct and compliance with them in consultation with municipal governments. Also, be it resolved that the legislation encompass the Association of Municipalities of Ontario recommendations for updating municipal codes of conduct to account for workplace safety and harassment, creating a flexible administrative penalty regime adapted to the local economic financial circumstances of municipalities across Ontario, increasing training of municipal integrity commissioners to enhance consistency of investigations and recommendations across the province, allowing municipalities to apply to a member of the judiciary to remove a sitting member if recommended through the report of a municipal integrity commissioner, prohibit a member so removed from sitting for election in the term of removal and the subsequent term of office. I'll call for discussion, noting that I have changed the word municipal name, which is in parentheses, to Municipality of Brighton. Hoping that's okay with you, Councillor Wheeldon and Councillor Rowley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next is correspondence for the TMH Gala sponsorship from Kim Harrington. It's moved by Councillor Wielden, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the request for sponsorship of the TMH Gala from Kim Harrington, RLP Pro Alliance Realty Brighton, and that council supports the request for sponsorship for the TMH Gala at the bronze sponsorship level, $1,500. And before I open the floor to discussion, I will just let everyone know it will be my intention to purchase a table at that event and invite members of council along. If that changes anybody's concept of where they might like to send monies, then that's okay too. So is there any discussion? Councillor Wielden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a brief discussion with Director Whitterfield before the meeting tonight about where we might find the money for this, and discussed the possibility of purchasing a table instead of this. That was after I had signed this motion. If you are purchasing a table, then I'm less excited about the idea of taking this out of grants and aid, which is where I otherwise would have suggested we take it from. If we're getting a table anyway, I think that's a good opportunity for us to be there.
Thank you. Just by way of information, we did both last year. We did the sponsorship and the table purchase. But if one is fine, then as long as whoever gets invited spends lots of money at the silent auction, I think everybody will be happy. Councillor Butwell enjoyed her time at the Invisible Ribbon Gala, and I think required a second truck to move stuff home that evening. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
I agree with what you're saying, but I think the bronze sponsorship shows that the municipality or the community is all behind supporting the hospital. And we are already, but this event is specifically for equipment, certain type of equipment. I won't get into the details. And our name is going to be flashed with everybody else's. So it'd be nice to show that we're there and we support them. And $1,500, I think, is a reasonable amount. And it's been done in the past, and it's probably somewhere in the budget somewhere.
Well, it's not.
Well,
it's not. So it would have to
then-
come out of contingency or grants and aid or wherever we directed it to come out of.
Well, we've spent a lot of grants and aid. We were going to save some of that, but we didn't, I don't think.
We save it for just this kind of
All right,
circumstance.
so
actually.
if there's money there, then maybe it can be good money spent, so.
Councillor Butwell.
Through the chair to Director Whitterfield, roughly how much is left in the grants and aid? I don't think there's much in there at
No.
all, is there? I say that because we used a significant portion of that for the Smithfield playground, I believe. Did we not? No, we didn't use that? Oh, we did that differently.
Yeah, there should be a good $15,000 chunk in there, I think, unless we've used.
I thought we had set aside around 12,800. I know that we did use some of that money for a few things. The monies for the farmers market, the funds that we provided to the additional funds for Brighton Digital Archives to the library. There was one other thing. So I'm thinking 7,000 might be a good number, rounded off somehow.
So there's certainly $1,500 in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. My recollection is kind of the same as Director Whitterfield. We're about 8,000-ish in left in grants and aids. And secondly, I concur with the deputy mayor. I think it's important that we demonstrate our support. I mean, the table is great, but that bronze sponsorship gets a name flash and recognition for Brighton as being a supporter of the TMH. So I would like to support the deputy mayor on that one.
Thank you, everyone. So the motion still says support at the bronze level. Should we add that the monies be taken from the grants in aid budget? I've added the words and sponsorship to be paid from grants and aid. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? And there being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to FYI correspondence. The first is from a letter from the Trent Memorial Hospital Foundation. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council received the thank you for donation from the Trenton Memorial Hospital Foundation. Is there any discussion? That's not this. That's not, that's a different. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Northumberland County updates moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. That council received the Northumberland County updates for June 12th to 23rd, 2023 as information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. That council received the update from the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus 2023 Strategic Priorities, Attainable and Affordable Housing for Information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Is there anyone in the gallery who has any questions with regard to anything on tonight's agenda? And there's no one who may have those kinds of questions joining us on Zoom. So we will take a 10-minute recess before proceeding into closed